All right, let's just dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most brilliant, one of the most out there, and honestly, one of the most deeply troubling albums ever made, Captain Beefheart's 1969 masterpiece, Trout Mask Replica. This is pretty much how people talked about the album the second it came out. It just sounds like nothing that came before it, or anything that's come out since, really. It's a truly otherworldly thing that, even over 50 years later, still completely challenges you as a listener. And that, right there, gets us to the core of the debate. For every single critic who calls this thing a work of unparalleled genius, you're gonna find a listener who just hears, well, a wall of impenetrable noise. It's gotta be one of the most polarizing records in all of music history. So how in the world was an album this radical even created? That's the big question we're gonna dig into. And let me tell you, the story behind the music is somehow even stranger and a lot more disturbing than the album itself. To even begin to understand this album, you have to understand the man who is pulling all the strings, Don Van Vliet, this really enigmatic artist who's better known to the world as Captain Beefheart. See, the thing about Van Vliet is he wasn't just a musician. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, and he came at music with that kind of mind. He didn't want to write songs in the way you and I think of them. Nope. He wanted to sculpt sound. And he had this iron will, this vision that had absolutely zero room for compromise. So a few key things really set the stage for this masterpiece. His friendship as a teenager with Frank Zappa, another guy who loved to break rules, was absolutely crucial. After a couple of pretty experimental blues albums, Zappa comes to him and offers a deal he can't refuse: total, complete artistic freedom. Van Vliet took that freedom and ran with it. In October 1968, he moves his whole band into a house to start his grand and pretty disturbing experiment. And this is where the story takes a really dark turn. What went down in that house in Woodland Hills is the kind of thing that's become the stuff of music legend, and frankly, psychological horror. For 8 long months, the members of his magic band were basically trapped in this small house, almost completely cut off from everything and everyone they knew. And the living conditions, just awful. Van Vliet had total control over the food, sometimes leaving them with just one tiny meal a day. He'd make them rehearse for days on end with hardly any sleep. He literally turned that house into an artistic prison. What's so horrifying is just how methodical he was about it. He used these classic cult leader tactics: constant verbal abuse, turning the band members against each other to create this atmosphere of paranoia, and yeah, even physical violence. It was a complete psychological dismantling of these poor musicians. And this was very, very real danger. We're not just talking about some artistic squabbles here. The drummer, John French, who also had the impossible job of writing down all this complex music, he really got the worst of it. He later recalled being physically thrown down a flight of stairs by Beefheart. So you have to be asking, why? Why do all this? Why put these guys through such extreme torment? Well, in Van Vliet's mind, all of that suffering was absolutely essential to create a totally new sound. The whole goal was this idea we can call musical deconstruction. He wanted to completely break his musicians down, to basically erase every normal musical instinct they had learned their entire lives, and then rebuild them from zero so they could only play his music exactly the way he heard it in his own head. And the way they actually composed this stuff was just grueling. Van Vliet couldn't write music in the traditional way, so he'd sit at a piano and just hum or whistle some incredibly complex part. Then John French, the drummer he was abusing, would have to somehow write it all down. After that, the rest of the band was forced to learn these crazy, difficult parts by rote for 12, sometimes 18 hours a day. His instructions were just totally abstract. He wouldn't talk about chords or scales like a normal band leader. Oh no. Instead, he'd give these surreal commands, like telling his guitarist to play like a broken-down washing machine. It just forced them to throw out everything they knew about playing guitar and just create pure sound. Okay, and here is maybe the most astonishing fact in this whole story. After 8 months of this relentless, torturous rehearsal, the band went into the studio and recorded the instrumental tracks for 21 of the album's songs in a single, jaw-dropping 4.5-hour session. They had become this single, almost telepathic unit. So, when the album was finally released, it created this massive paradox that music fans and critics are still wrestling with today. From a commercial standpoint, it was a complete and total disaster. I mean, it sold almost nothing. But its artistic impact? That was the exact opposite. The album's influence on other musicians was, and still is, absolutely immense. Seriously, you can find this album's DNA everywhere in alternative music. John Lydon from the Sex Pistols, Tom Waits, Sonic Youth, PJ Harvey, just countless artists heard Trout Mask Replica and had this light bulb moment where they realized, oh, music has no rules. It basically gave them permission to be as weird and different as they wanted to be. So, what it all boils down to is this really uncomfortable equation. On one side, you have this work of boundary-shattering genius that changed music forever. And on the other side, you have the profound, lasting trauma that was inflicted on the people who made it. And the thing is, you can't separate the two. They are completely and totally intertwined. And that leaves us with this huge, lingering question. The album is real. It exists. It's brilliant. But it was born out of extreme cruelty. It really forces us to ask ourselves, where do we draw the line? Can a masterpiece ever really be worth the human cost?